Your Locked On Blackhawks, your daily podcast on the Chicago Blackhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, Blackhawks fans? Welcome back to another episode of Locked On Blackhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I'm your host, Jack Bushman. Quick reminder off the top to hit the like button, comment down below, and subscribe to Locked On Blackhawks on YouTube. Do me another quick favor. Make sure you're following Locked On Blackhawks on X at capital L, capital O _ Blackhawks. That account is closing in on 2,000 followers. Would really like to hit that milestone. All of that is 100% free, will not cost you anything, and really does help me in growing the channel over here on Locked On Blackhawks. But happy Thursday, everyone. Again, thank you all for joining me on another episode of Locked On Blackhawks, your one-stop shop for all things Chicago Blackhawks. Tonight at 9:30 p.m. Central Time, we get the first NHL meeting between 2023 number one overall pick Connor Bedard and 2024 number one overall pick Macklin Celebrini, as the Blackhawks battle the Sharks out west in the second meeting of their three-game road trip. Now, these two teams have already met twice this season, with both matchups coming back in October, as the NHL likes to do, pumping out early meetings with their biggest stars, as we saw with Connor Bedard when the Blackhawks went through the absolute gauntlet to begin the 2023-2024 campaign. They had Bedard versus Celebrini scheduled for a couple of meetings in the first month of this year's regular season, but unfortunately at that point in time, Celebrini was out due to injury, so weren't able to see these two go head-to-head up until this evening. And as I've talked with JD Young from Locked On Sharks a couple of different times this season, it's going to be very fun to watch both of these kids and compare them to throughout the next decade or two with these organizations, as well as not only them being, the main focal points and potential next superstars of this league, but the Blackhawks and the Sharks, of course, also possess two of the deepest prospect pools in the entire NHL. So will be fun to kind of compare the Blackhawks and the Sharks rebuild alongside one another for a handful of years, and also comparing their two superstars in Connor Bedard in Macklin Celebrini. Hopefully we'll be getting some very fun Stanley Cup playoff matchups between these two organizations, as I always like to kid with JD in the not so distant future. But to kick things off on today's episode, Blackhawks fans, I know I did this probably about 2 weeks ago when I did a crossover with JD Young from Locked On Sharks, but I did want to get into a quick little mini comparison between Connor Bedard's rookie NHL campaign and what we've seen from Macklin Celebrini in his first season with the San Jose Sharks. We know what Bedard has been doing with the Blackhawks this season. I know we're familiar with what he did last year, but just as kind of a comparison, going back to Bedard's rookie campaign last season, wound up tallying 61 points, 22 goals, and 39 assists in 68 games played, was minus 44 in terms of plus minus, although I personally don't really think that's an indicative stat of how players truly impact the game whatsoever, especially on one of the worst teams in all of hockey. Out of Bedard's 22 goals that he scored last year, 4 came on the power play, so 18 even strength goals for number 98. Shot 10.7%, which I actually expected to be higher in Bedard's first season. I thought he'd be somewhere between 12 and 13, and we're kind of starting to see that a little bit more here as of late. Tallied 19 minutes and 47 seconds of time on ice as a rookie, the top line center for the Blackhawks. The biggest struggle for Bedard in his first season was probably on the defensive side of things, as well as the faceoff dot, which, funny enough, I just talked about Bedard's recent uptick at the faceoff circle on yesterday's episode during segment 2. Make sure to go and check that out, because I think it's noteworthy what Bedard has been doing over the last couple of months at the dot to improve his face-off win percentage on the season. And in terms of Corsi for percentage at 5-on-5, Bedard had a 51.3 Corsi for percentage. Now for Macklin Celebrini, the 2024 number one overall pick, he suited up in 54 54 games for San Jose on the season. As I mentioned, sadly, missed a decent chunk earlier on to kick off the season. Has tallied 48 points, though, in 54 games. Really solid start to his NHL career. 20 goals and 28 assists for Celebrini in his first 54 contests. He's fared better in the goal-scoring department than I imagined. I knew he had an absolute howitzer from what I saw during his freshman season with Boston University, but I did not think he'd be the one finding more success in the goal-scoring column compared to Connor Bedard with 20 goals in 54 games compared to Bedard's 22 tucks in 68 games last year. And even Bedard this season with only 17 goals in 65 games. I really didn't think Macklin Celebrini would have the edge in the goal scoring. I do believe Connor Bedard has the better and high-level shot, and I think long-term he's going to be the better sniper of the two. But Celebrini is a good goal scorer in addition to everything else he does well. Some good playmaking abilities, 28 assists in 54 games for a San Jose Sharks team that doesn't have a lot of talent on it. Interestingly enough, Macklin Celebrini, who as I'll get into here in just a moment, I think the biggest difference between he and Connor Bedard thus far, and I talked about this with JD also, is how he can play a grown man game. He's more reliable in the defensive zone and probably has the higher floor than Connor Bedard does just because he can impact the game in so many ways. For better or worse, Connor Bedard's just always going to be more of an offensive-minded player, whereas Macklin Celebrini, I think, is set up to be more well-rounded and trusted upon in defensive situations. Bedard definitely has the higher ceiling, though, and I think he's going to be a shoo-in for 100 points each and every season. I mean, kid's almost at a point per game already at 19 years old with this Blackhawks team around him. But what stat I found interesting, Blackhawks fans, was that Macklin Celebrini is minus 26 for San Jose in 54 games, despite all he does well defensively, how good he is in the dirty areas, along the boards, winning one-on-one battles. He's still a minus 26, and I don't think people are critiquing him for his defense or saying he's an absolute liability out there. No, this is just a result of Macklin Celebrini playing on the worst team in hockey. You're going to have a bad plus-minus more times than not when that's the case, especially when, like Bedard last year, averaging nearly 20 minutes of time on ice at 19 minutes and 47 seconds. Macklin Celebrini has nearly the same ice time, 19 minutes and 46 seconds per game. So that's just a symptom of playing a huge role on a bad team. Celebrini does have 7 power play goals, interestingly enough. So Bedard's 18 even strength tucks in 68 games, I do think gives him a little bit of an edge at 5-on-5 with Celebrini only having 13 in 54. 10.6 shooting percentage for Macklin Celebrini, oddly similar to Connor Bedard as well, not only in time on ice, but in shooting percentage. But where Macklin Celebrini has really made his hay is winning 48.1% of his faceoffs as an 18-year-old in his first NHL season. Already feels like he's such a reliable two-way player at a young age, and it's really incredible. In addition to the compete level, the motor, like I said, winning one-on-one battles and how good he is along the boards. Really impressive stuff from Celebrini, and he has a 57.2 Corsi for percentage at 5-on-5 this season. So kind of comparing these two in terms of their rookie season, I do think the gap between Bedard and Celebrini is a lot narrower than people anticipated. Like, Macklin was getting hype as the 2024 number 1 overall pick, but it wasn't at the same level of Connor Bedard. I think maybe there should have been a little bit more respect thrown Macklin Celebrini's way just because of how complete a player he is. I mentioned Connor Bedard. I think he's always going to have the higher offensive ceiling. I think he's going to be the one who accumulates more points and will be the better goal scorer. But Macklin Celebrini is more set up to play a Jonathan Toews-like game, whereas Connor Bedard, even though he's a center, Patrick Kane was a wing, obviously, his game is more set up to resemble Patrick Kane. They're just honestly two different style players, but it's going to be really fun to see them face off for the first time in the NHL here this evening. Connor mentioned in an interview yesterday that he's good friends with Celebrini and would be fun for them to have a long rivalry going head-to-head with one another. And I know Connor joked it might not be at the level of Sidney Crosby and Alex Ovechkin, but I know that's the hope for a lot of hockey fans, for me as a Blackhawk fan, and I'm sure for JD as a Sharks fan, to have some more interesting hockey games and create legitimate rivalries in terms of being the best in the Western Conference, again, like I mentioned, in the not-so-distant future. But as far as the Blackhawks' potential lineup that we could see them roll with tonight in San Jose, they were practicing yesterday afternoon, so we got a good look at what the forward lines and the defensive combinations could be. when they suit up here this evening. As far as the Blackhawks top line, Colton Dach, Connor Bedard, and Jason Dickinson skating as the top line. Dickinson returned on Monday against Colorado off of injured reserve. Interesting that the Blackhawks were not using him strictly at the center ice position. Now, he's obviously going to be taking a good amount of faceoffs, and they do have him in center ice spots at times because of how reliable he is, but I do think it is a rather interesting combination. Not my favorite in the world. I really would like to get Connor Bedard more consistent offensive-minded line mates. Although the Blackhawks have been winning games here as of late, Connor Bedard has been picking it up after going on that 7-game point drought, but I still think I would like to have Donato or Teravainen, or shoot, I know he's been ice cold and doesn't have a goal in like a month and a half, 2 months or something like that, but get Tyler Bertuzzi some reps with Connor Bedard. They worked well earlier on in the season before a bit of a dry spell. I don't know, just not my favorite top line. Did work well for them on Monday in Colorado, even though the Blackhawks were shut out for the first time on the season. Second line looks like it's going to remain Teravainen, Donato, and Mikheyev, which, don't get me wrong, Blackhawks fans, it's been an excellent line. They absolutely buzz. Teravainen and Mikheyev work so well together, and Donato's been the most consistent player for the Blackhawks all season long. It makes sense to have them as a line. But again, I think that Connor Bedard producing points and playing with confidence, I just feel like it should be a bigger priority, and have one of these three guys who have been the most consistent players kind of on both ends of the ice. Got to have one of them with Connor Bedard, along with Colton Dach, in my opinion. I do like how those two have worked together. Don't necessarily like Jason Dickinson on that right wing. Landon Slager, Frank Nazar, Nick Foligno look like they're going to shape up as the third line. Frank Nazar, man, is just so much fun to watch. An absolute ball of energy out there. The skating ability is so high level, allows him to make plays all over the ice. What a penalty shot goal he had last weekend. Kid's so much fun to watch, and I like pairing him with Landon Slaggert. I think those two can really buzz around and cause some havoc together in the neutral zone and on the defensive side of things. And then Philip Kurashev, Lucas Reichel, and Tyler Bertuzzi, which I actually do not hate as a skilled fourth line. If you're going to have Reichel down there, I'd like to see him with some skilled players. It's a little bit more feasible now that Craig Smith has been traded to the Detroit Red Wings, of course. While Pat Maroon looks like he's going to be the extra forward for the Blackhawks, Joe Veleno was not at practice yesterday due to an illness. According to Ben Pope of the Chicago Sun-Times, if he's good to go tonight, sounds like Veleno would jump into the lineup, and that wouldn't surprise me either, considering they just acquired him from Detroit, so they were obviously intrigued enough by his skills to do that. And Philip Kurashev is kind of on the outs with this organization, and we know Pat Maroon, while he is a great veteran leader, doesn't have to be suiting up on a nightly basis. On the defensive side of things, Ethan Del Mastro and Connor Murphy look like they're going to be skating as the top defensive pairing once again. Alex Vlasic and Wyatt Kaiser as the second pairing, with Kaiser playing his offside, which is a skill I think he's really flourished at here in his second NHL season, second pro season, I should say, and has just looked so comfortable in all facets of his game. He's really impressed me. Then Alec Martinez and Artem Levshinov look like they're going to round things out as the third pairing. Levshinov expected to suit up for the second consecutive game. Had a really sound debut on Monday in Colorado. Looked sharp on the power play. I liked his aggressiveness with the puck on his stick. The Blackhawks need that from their defensemen. He had the second most shot attempts on the team with 6, had 3 shots on goal and 2 block shots, and played over 20 minutes in that contest because Alec Martinez had to leave due to injury. I like putting him with a veteran like Martinez as a security blanket on that third pairing. Seems like TJ Brody and Louis Crevier are going to be the extra skaters watching from up in the press box. Spencer Knight, not officially confirmed. I'm recording this prior to the Blackhawks morning skate, but seems like he's going to get the nod, and why shouldn't he? He's been absolutely fantastic since being acquired from the Florida Panthers. Had another strong showing, despite the Blackhawks losing 3-0 in Colorado on Monday. We'll see if the Blackhawks can pick up a point for the 6th time in 7 games here in the month of March, when Connor Bedard and Macklin Celebrini face off for the first time in the NHL. Don't forget, it's a 9:30 p.m. Central Time puck drop out in San Jose here this evening. But there's everything to know before the Blackhawks battle with the San Jose Sharks. Coming up in just a moment with these two teams facing off here tonight, I'll get into an updated look at the Tankathon standings. Real quick though, Blackhawks fans, I got to talk to you all about the fine folks over at FanDuel. March Madness is here, and FanDuel is giving you the chance to get in on the action like never before. Because right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's 200 extra bucks that you can use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories and even who's cutting down the nets. With tournament games happening almost every day, there's always something exciting to bet on. And again, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So what are you waiting for? Go and get in on the action by visiting FanDuel.com to have fun watching college hoops all tournament long. Again, that's FanDuel.com to win $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Segment 2. As basically every NHL team is now under 20 games to go in the 2024-2025 regular season, and the Blackhawks and the Sharks, two of the biggest bottom feeders in the NHL, are facing off for the final time here this season. I thought it would be a perfect time to get into an updated look on the Tankathon Standings, to get a look at the bottom, the battle at the bottom, to see who's going to have the best odds to landing the number 1 overall pick in the 2025 NHL draft. And at this point in time, Blackhawks fans, it really looks like it's a 2-horse race between our Hawks and the San Jose Sharks. Although San Jose is firmly in control at this point, as they have a league worst 30.326. I was going to say 32.6. That wouldn't be accurate, even though it is accurate. That's not how the point percentages are depicted on NHL.com or on Tankathon. The Sharks currently have the best odds at landing the number 1 overall pick with a .326 point percentage on the season through 66 games, giving them just 43 points. If they finish the year in this number 1 spot as the worst team in hockey, they'll have a 25.5% chance at number 1 in the 2025 NHL draft. Right behind them, though, right above them, depending on how you're looking at things, is our Chicago Blackhawks, who have a .377 points percentage through 65 games on the season, giving them 49 points, 6 points clear of the San Jose Sharks. And should they finish as the second worst team in hockey, we know what that means. It would give them a 13.5% chance at landing the number 1 overall selection. Same thing as last year, where San Jose was the worst team in hockey and the Blackhawks were second. They wound up taking Artem Levshinov at number 2, while the San Jose Sharks won the Celebrini sweepstakes. At number 3 is the Buffalo Sabres, a team that I said, remember the last time I looked at the Tankathon standings, it was San Jose, Chicago, and Nashville in that 3 spot. The 4th team that I said could throw their hat into the mix here is the Buffalo Sabres, not only because of their losing ways, but also because of all the rumors of them trying to get rid of some players. They were one of the teams at the bottom, like the Blackhawks, so I saw a clear path for them getting worse as sellers at this year's NHL trade deadline. So not surprised to see the Buffalo Sabres surpass Nashville and now be at the 3 spot in the Tankathon standings, as they have a .438 points percentage through 64 games, giving them 56 points. That does have them 7 points ahead of the Blackhawks and 13 points better than the San Jose Sharks. If Buffalo finishes as the 3rd worst team in hockey, that would give them an 11.5% chance of having the ping pong balls bounce in their favor. At number 4 are those Nashville Predators. Haven't gone all that far, even though things have been better for them over the last month or so. They do have a .445 points percentage on the season through 64 games, giving them 57 points, 1 point ahead of the Buffalo Sabres. So could be a battle for that 3 spot up until the end of the season. If Nashville finishes in that 4 spot, or whoever finishes in the 4 spot, will have a 9.5% chance at number 1 in this year's draft. And then last but certainly not least, we have the Seattle Kraken, who have a .455 points percentage right above the Nashville Predators. Through 66 games, they have 58 points, but have played 2 more games than both the Buffalo Sabres and the Nashville Predators. So wouldn't be surprising to see Seattle fall until that 4 spot or even in that 3 spot here in the next couple of days. 58 points for Seattle through 66 games, giving them currently an 8.5% chance at the number 1 overall pick. So as I said, because Buffalo has 56 points, 7 more than Chicago, 13 more than San Jose. Nashville has 57 points, 8 more than Chicago, 14 more than San Jose. And Seattle having 58 points, 15 more than San Jose, and 9 more than the Chicago Blackhawks. Pretty clear-cut 2-horse race for landing at least the best odds to get the first overall pick in the number 1 draft. Of course, we are not sure exactly how the ping pong balls are going to bounce. However, if you do finish with number 1, you're guaranteed to have at least a top 3 selection. So tonight's matchup, the final contest of the season between the Blackhawks and Sharks, is pretty meaningful. Now, again, as I kind of talked about in that recent crossover with JD Young, I don't necessarily know if I want the Blackhawks to get the first overall pick, and that might be an absolutely asinine statement from yours truly. I'm openly admitting that because I know Matthew Schaefer is a special talent, only 17 years old, and is going to be 17 years old until September, and has a special skill set, and is kind of, even though he hasn't played since the World Juniors, has separated himself as the consensus number 1 in this year's draft class. And I know he's a different level of defenseman than Kevin Korchinski, Alex Vlasic, Sam Renzel. He's a different level prospect than what the Blackhawks already do have in their pipeline. But as I broke down on yesterday's show, it's already a pretty crowded group back there. And I know drafting Matthew Schaefer, like, they would make room for him in the blue line. I'm not ignoring that, and I don't want to make it sound like, should the Blackhawks wind up with number 1, it would be awful if they land Matthew Schaefer. It would just be kind of a conundrum for the Blackhawks, considering what they truly need is not another left-handed defenseman. Although I understand the skills that Matthew Schaefer has is different than the left-handed defenseman they already have in their system. They just truly need a high-level forward prospect to develop alongside Connor Bedard. That's really what's missing in this prospect pool. That's really why a lot of people wanted the Hawks to take Ivan Demidov last year. So getting the second overall pick for the Blackhawks wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. And should they go on to win this game here this evening, as they have been playing better here as of late, San Jose kind of has been in the same spot. The Blackhawks would go up 8 points in the Tankathon standings. That would really put San Jose in the driver's seat in terms of landing the best chance at getting the first overall pick. We'll see what winds up happening here tonight when these two teams face out west. But there is the latest update on the Tankathon standings, with all of these teams being under 20 games to go in the regular season. And speaking of under 20 games to go in the regular season, before I wrap things up here in just a moment, I'll take a look at the playoff races that are going down out in the Eastern Conference. Real quick though, Blackhawks fans, I got to talk to you all about Indeed. You just realized your business needed to hire someone like yesterday. How can you find amazing candidates fast? It's easy. Just use Indeed, because when it comes to hiring, Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other sites, because Indeed's sponsored jobs puts your post at the top of the page and helps you reach the right candidates faster. They make sure your post is seen by the right candidates right now, so you can skip all those unnecessary questions and steps, because right now you can speed up your hiring process with a $75 sponsored job credit by just going to Indeed.com/lockedon. Again, that's Indeed.com/lockedon to check it out right now and support our show by saying you heard all about Indeed on this very podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? Indeed is all you need. Thank you all for making Locked On Blackhawks your very first listen here to start off your Thursday. For your second listen, make sure to go and check out the Locked On NHL podcast, bringing you the daily league-wide stories that matter with the local coverage you love from Locked On. And you can easily find Locked On NHL right now on YouTube or wherever you may be listening to your podcasts. Segment 3, recently on the pod, I broke down all of the playoff battles that are going down in this home stretch of the regular season in the Western Conference, both in the Pacific and the Central Division. Well, today I wanted to do the same exact thing for the Eastern Conference playoff battles and dive through the Metropolitan and Atlantic divisions, go over the standings at this point in time, and give some of my predictions as to who creeps in the final playoff spots out in the East. Starting with the Atlantic division, where I got a good synopsis of how things are going by staying with my good buddy Armando Velez from Locked On Panthers over the weekend. It was very fun doing an in-person crossover with Armando. I've obviously done many crossovers with Locked On NHL hosts since taking over on the show, but have never done one in person. So it was really cool to do that with Armando, go to see his place in Orlando, and was very fortunate to have him open his home to me for a couple of days while I was down there covering a golf tournament. But I got a good idea of how the Atlantic Division is shaping up and the stress that he's carrying, despite the Florida Panthers having such a phenomenal trade deadline, the stress they're carrying, battling it out with the Toronto Maple Leafs and also the Tampa Bay Lightning at the top of the Atlantic Division. Florida currently holds the edge as they have 83 points in 65 games on the season. That has them 2 points clear of the Toronto Maple Leafs at this point in time. However, bombshell news coming out yesterday, Aaron Ekblad suspended for 20 games for violating the league's performance-enhancing substance policy. Unfortunate for the Florida Panthers, although they did just acquire Seth Jones, who is more than comfortable playing 25 minutes a game on the top pairing. But tough time of the year for that to happen to the Florida Panthers as they're looking to go back-to-back. And as I mentioned, right behind them, the Toronto Maple Leafs, who have 81 points and 64 games played. So the Panthers do have one more game played than them. Going to be interesting to see them duke it out for that top spot throughout the rest of the year. And then the Tampa Bay Lightning aren't out of it either, as they have 78 points, only 5 points back of the Florida Panthers in 64 games on the year. The Ottawa Senators also still in the hunt for that third and final Atlantic Division playoff spot as they have 73 points, 5 points back of Tampa Bay in 64 games. Then going out to the Metropolitan Division. It's been all about the Washington Capitals this year and Ovechkin's chase for 99's record. I really do believe Alex is going to be doing it this season, and the Blackhawks, interestingly enough, do have a meeting with the Capitals out in Washington in early April. But the Caps, as they've been all season long atop the Metro, they have 94 points in 65 games, comfortable lead at the top. The Carolina Hurricanes, despite all their failures and how I personally think they're a joke of an organization, they do still have 82 points in 65 games, having them sitting pretty in the second spot in the Metro. And then the New Jersey Devils are in third with 76 points in 66 games, although they did lose superstar Jack Hughes for the season, which I think basically takes away all of their chances. Columbus Blue Jackets still in the hunt as well for that third seed in the Metros. They have 70 points in 64 games on the season. Then getting to the wild card, right now, the Senators have the top wild card spot, like I said, with 73 points. The Columbus Blue Jackets right behind them with 70 points. And then it is an absolute cluster of 5 teams fighting for those final playoff spots. The Montreal Canadiens currently in third with 68 points in 65 games. The New York Rangers also have 68 points in 65 games. The Detroit Red Wings also have 68 points in 65 games. Then the Boston Bruins have 68 points in 66 games. And the New York Islanders have 65 points in 64 games. First, as far as my prediction for the Atlantic, how it winds up shaping up, I think the Toronto Maple Leafs are just going to play with that extra edge down the stretch. Whereas a team like the Florida Panthers, they know how to get it done. Yes, I'm sure they want home ice the rest of the way, but they know they might not necessarily need that to win the Stanley Cup. They have enough experience in that room to get it done, regardless of who has home ice throughout the Stanley Cup playoffs. So I think the Toronto Maple Leafs are going to wind up winning the Atlantic Division. Call me crazy. I have the Florida Panthers finishing second, and then I have the Tampa Bay Lightning finishing third. As far as the Metro, I have Washington holding on to that top spot and probably winning the President's Trophy. The Carolina Hurricanes, I do think, despite trading Mikko Rantanen and all the problems they've gone through over the last few months, I think they're going to finish in that second spot. The New Jersey Devils, because they lose Jack Hughes, I think the air is kind of sucked out of their tires. I think Columbus is going to wind up sneaking into that 3 seed in the Metro for an epic first-round playoff matchup with the Carolina Hurricanes. In the wild card out in the East, I do think Ottawa is playing with a chip on their shoulder. They're going to wind up securing that top wild card spot and have a real interesting matchup with the Toronto Maple Leafs, in the first round. And then in the 2 spot, I do think the New Jersey Devils are going to wind up getting in. They've just done enough good work up to this point in time where I think the cushion that they have currently was 76 points. The first wild card team out, like I said, Montreal, and a slew of other teams was 68. That's a big enough cushion for them with 16, 18 games left on the season to sneak in for that second wild card spot. If it's not them, I do think the Montreal Canadiens are going to be the team that puts together the best run down the stretch. But there is the latest updates on the Eastern Conference playoff battles. That's going to wrap up today's episode of Locked On Blackhawks, everyone. Again, thank you all for joining me on the show. Be sure to go and subscribe to Locked On Blackhawks on YouTube right now and follow Locked On Blackhawks for free wherever you may be listening to your podcast. That way, you can check out the latest episode as soon as it's available each and every day. As always, I'm your host, Jack Bushman. Find me on X at Jack Bushman too, but make sure to go and follow the show's account at _Blackhawks on X. Really close to hitting 2,000 subscribers on that count. Would greatly appreciate all of the support. Until next time, everyone, enjoy the rest of your Thursdays. Would love to see Connor Bedard and the Blackhawks come away with the win in the first matchup with Macklin Celebrini and the Sharks. Until tomorrow's episode, everyone, enjoy your days. I'll see you next time on the Locked On Blackhawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.